You're live, Mayor Saunderson. Excuse me, Mayor Saunderson, you're live.
Stephanie, are we live? Are we good to go?
Yes, Your Worship. We're good to go.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, Council, it's 5 o'clock and time to get down to work. So I'll call the meeting to order. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. And I will now look to the Deputy Mayor, moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that the content of the Council agenda for November 23, 2020 be adopted as amended, and there's a few amendments. The addition of item 6.5, Downtown Collingwood BIA Board of Management request for free parking during the holiday season. Item 14.2.2, Rediversity and Inclusion Initiative Letters. We are removing items 14.2.3, Collingwood Residential Tax Rate, and item 14.2.4, Affordable Housing, and we are replacing that item with an update on the Joint Physician Recruitment Committee from Councillor Hamlin. And we will be moving forward the official plan presentation, which is item 14.2.1, and we will deal with that after community announcements. So with all those amendments being made, I will now call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item, item 3, declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. With the addendum of the Collingwood Downtown BA Board of Management request for free parking downtown, even though I have my own parking lot in my business downtown, I will be stepping away from that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, please let us know and the general nature thereof. And that brings us to item 4, which is the adoption of the minutes. And it is moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that the minutes of the council meeting held November 16, 2020 be approved as presented. Are there any omissions or amendments, Council? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, that takes us to item 5, which is community announcements. And I will start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to the community. A couple of announcements on behalf of staff and others, and then a comment that I'd like to convey. The two announcements. The first one is an event that's taking place tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. This is the Craft Beverage Producers Roundtable, and it's an opportunity to meet Collingwood's 8 craft beverage producers together for the first time via Zoom. It's going to be hosted by Cassie Mackel of Lowdown Bar. This virtual roundtable gives you a chance to find out more about the 4 brewers, 3 distillers, and 1 kombuchery they call Collingwood Home, making it Ontario's craft beverage capital. To register for this free event and to find out more about the Collingwood Craft Beverage self-guided tour, go to the website craftbeveragecapital.ca. And the second one is with regards to the annual event that unfortunately due to COVID can't take place this year in its normal setting, and that is the Ho 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 5K Collingwood Community Challenge. Instead, it's an opportunity for you to participate dressed in your best Santa Claus outfit on your own, and then be able to post your results showing your support for this activity. So while the usual activity cannot run because of COVID, the local company 365 Sports is still putting on their challenge of getting your Santa suit on and going for a shuffle. This activity runs from November the 25th to December the 31st and is available to all Canadians. This weekend, however, they are hoping that Collingwood can step it up and get out on their own time whenever they want on our 70 kilometers of trail system. Santa suits still can be ordered at the website hoholiday5k.com. And if I can just go back to the craft beverage producer event, last week I had an opportunity from the luxury of my own couch to attend a conference in New York City. And one of the items that we attended was a cocktail mixology from a professional bartender. It's a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Cassie has to offer and to learning more about these 8 businesses that are operating within Collingwood. We truly have become a unique environment, and the website itself, craftbeveragecapital.ca, says it all. And the last one is more of a comment than an announcement. I'm stating the obvious when I say that the last 8 months have been tough for everyone. And in the time that I've lived in this community, which is December of '96, I don't remember a time, in my opinion, where our downtown has looked as good. And if there was ever a year to shine a little light and brightness and to bring a festive cheer, it is this year. And I just would like to compliment, first and foremost, the business community of the BIA and all of the supporting cast, and you know who you are, who have brought this together. So far, what has been showcased in the last week has been extremely well received. There's more to come, including socially distanced Santa Claus. So well done to the BIA. And again, if there was ever a year, this was it. Cheers.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor, and you're absolutely right. The downtown core looks fantastic. And in fact, I saw Santa out doing his rounds already. So he's in full force here in Collingwood. Councillor McLeod.
I am grateful to the Deputy Mayor for reminding me about the Santa suit that I have in my basement from last year's event. It was quite something to be part of that with about 400, maybe 500 other people in crazy Santa suits on our trails. It was hilarious. I will not tell you my time. It was very slow. I do have a community announcement, and I received today, and I hope you'll indulge me. I'm going to praise some of our staff on behalf of a community group which sent me a note today. So I think this is really through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO. The note I got today was from the treasurer of the Collingwood Lawn Bowling Club, and who was hoping I could pass along some thanks to Dean Culver, Wendy Martin, and Michelle Findley. The Lawn Bowling Club, like many organizations, was terrified in the spring by the pandemic and afraid that they may not be able to put together a season. And following communications with Dean, Wendy, and Michelle, the club had a plan to make return to play a reality. Fewer than half of the membership felt safe enough to do so, but the remainder did manage it. And they said, Larry G says it turned out to be an exciting, energizing and rewarding summer. So we can all cast our minds back to when grass was still growing, and they're looking forward to getting back to it next year. And so through you, your worship, I'd like through you to Sonia, to those staff members, kudos to you for the hard work. And I know that all of our staff have been working hard under difficult conditions for these many months. And that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod, and that's some well-deserved praise for our staff. Councillor Comey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll just keep that trend going. I have a couple announcements, please, where I'd also like to recognize some things. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, I had some issues. Thank you so much. Okay, so first of all, a thank you to Director Slama and her staff for their participation in the recent Ontario Traffic Council School Zone Safety Symposium. I'm so glad to hear that staff took time to participate, and I'm certain our community is very grateful that we're keeping active transportation at the forefront. And also a great thank you to PRC for a great down-to-earth approach to upcycling and repurposing by getting the wood from the town's recently decommissioned break wall. And they got that over to the Trails Committee, and I think I have this right, that they hand removed thousands of nails and individually cut over 600 pieces of wood to repair and complete some trails work. So thank you to PRC for facilitating, and to our fabulous Trails Committee for their hands-on approach. I think that's a great little green story. Thank you so much.
Two good news stories, and it's great to see that committee continue from wood chips to wood cutting. So that's good news. Councillor Madigan.
I've got nothing this evening, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only to share very heartily in the Deputy Mayor's praise of downtown Collingwood and the wonderful job that they have done to decorate our downtown. It is indeed, it warms the heart and it warms the soul this year especially to see what they have done, and also what our staff have done inside Town Hall, which looks equally as festive. So thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson.
Councillor Hamlin.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have two announcements. The first is as a correspondence we received today from Georgian Bay Forever, and as council may recall, we were pursuing two pilot projects with Georgian Bay Forever. The letter came in today, so I thought I'd make the announcement, but I think it will be on the agenda for our SIC, since most of our green initiatives come through the SIC. But they were successful in getting the funding for the divert and capture, the fight to keep microplastic fibers out of our water project, which it's a 3-year program. And we're looking at installing 300 machine microfiber filters to capture the effluent from our washing machines, to keep it out of our sewer systems, and to catch the microfibers in there. And then the second is the Zero Plastic Initiative for Diversion 2.0 program, which is a 1.5-year program focused on installing diversion tactics such as C-bins, gutter bins, and trash traps. So I just wanted to get that out. They have actually started the recruitment process in early November for the microfiber filtration systems, and apparently they have already 100 residents who have expressed interest. So if people are interested in getting involved in this exciting pilot project, they can either reach out to us through Town Hall or through Georgian Bay Forever. And there is a website here that I'm missing. I think it is, you know what, we'll post it up and we'll publish it at the SIC meeting. And the second announcement is, people have already alluded to this, but at 12:01 this morning, Collingwood and the Simcoe Muskoka Health Unit was upgraded from yellow to orange on the COVID scale through the province. And so that increases restrictions for us. And we have done a great job in our community. We have one of the lowest infection rates in Simcoe County. And I think a great deal of credit goes to our residents for their diligence and making sure that they're following the physical distancing, wearing masks when indoors or unable to keep the 2-meter distance, and washing hands frequently. So please, people, keep up the vigilance, and we will continue to set the standard in Simcoe County as we work through this pandemic. And with that, I'm going to bring forward the presentation from Planning Partnership, and I will pass it over to Director Farr to make the introductions. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight we'll be providing an update on the official plan project. Since council directed the update to the official plan, we've made tremendous progress. We began earlier this year in January conducted extensive public consultation through January into March. Subsequently, our consultants, the planning partnership, continue to work on and develop a number of very interesting, detailed discussion papers on a number of topics of interest: growth management, natural heritage, housing, community design, just a range of very interesting topics relevant to the official plan update. These discussion papers were meant to identify issues and trends in the community, and the stage that we're in right now is generally a response to those issues, its options and recommendations. All the information that we've been working on the official plan update is available on the town's Engage Collingwood page. All residents would need to do is visit Engage Collingwood, look for the official plan update page, and navigate there. As I indicated earlier, we have received a tremendous response. We have an email blast list of over 600 different names. I think we've had points of contact with over 700 residents of one form or the other. And we're excited to announce our upcoming public consultation workshops on this, the options and recommendation phase, that are scheduled for November 30th. That's Monday, November 30th, and Tuesday, December 1st. Again, residents, businesses, interested parties just need to visit the town's Engage Collingwood page, and they can register for the sessions. They're split among a number of topics at different times throughout the day so that they're available to a wide range of people. We wouldn't be here without the great work of our consulting team, and our lead on the project, Ron Palmer, is in attendance this evening to provide a presentation on the options and recommendations highlights. This stage will give the public and council, I guess, an eye to the directions that we're heading in with the official plan based on the consultation to date. And we're very excited, looking forward to more public involvement on this. This provides an overview and a lead into this stage of the project. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ron Palmer with the planning partnership, who will walk us through a presentation providing highlights on this stage so far. Ron, if you'd like to open your camera or connect to the presentation that's going to be posted on the screen.
Thanks, Adam. I'm not quite allowed to turn on my camera yet.
Okay.
I have to start my video. Okay. There I am.
There's Ron. Ron does have a presentation, so once he's provided his introductory comments, I asked the clerk, there we go, to post it. Thanks.
Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I do have a presentation. It's about 12 slides long, so it's not extensive, but there's a lot of information to take in. Mostly, it's a pretty high-level discussion about where I believe that we may be heading in the official plan, and it's a starting point for the next round of consultation so that people can have some input as to where we might head in terms of developing policies going forward. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a bit of an update as to where we are in the work program. I'm going to talk about some of the guiding values, the key values that I've heard throughout the process that will be forming part of our vision statement and our principles that, of course, set the stage for the policy framework that follows. I am going to give you a brief overview of an options and recommendations report that will be released this week, hopefully tomorrow. And then I'll talk a little bit about the next steps going forward, at least to the end of the year. Next slide. So as Adam identified, we've been at this since February, March, right at the beginning of this pandemic. We were able to get out and talk to all of council and do some face-to-face public engagement. and that has slowly evolved into not face-to-face public engagement, and including an online survey. The online survey, I was asked to give a little bit of detail. We had almost 530 respondents to the online survey, which is absolutely fantastic. Some of the demographics are 67% female, 33% male, 35% in the 61 plus age group, 39% in the 41 to 60 age group, 22% in the 26 to 40 age group. A place where I think we need to do some work is with the younger folks. We only had about 4% in the under 25 age group. As I mentioned, the results of our consultation to date and the results of that survey are actually very interesting. And we did produce a What We Heard report back in July, and it's well worth the read. What I've been finding very interesting in this process is the level of consistency, not only among staff and council, but also with the public. I think everybody's pretty much in tune with what everybody else is thinking. It's not 100% agreement, but certainly a lot of consistency in the topics that people are thinking about. Next slide. So we proposed in our work program 6 phases. And we are embarking upon phase 4, which is the directions, recommendations part of the official plan preparation process. We've identified options. We've talked about what some of those options might be. And we've made some recommendations on to where we think we might go in the official plan. And that's an important part of our conversation, not only with council and staff, but with the public in general. Once we're done this, we move on to actually preparing the policy document, the actual official plan. And we expect to be back out to you having a conversation about the details of that plan early next year. And then following that, hopefully a quick adoption, get it to the County of Simcoe for approval, and hopefully that all goes wonderfully well, as I expect it to. Next slide. When we began this project, and you may all recall, we started with individual meetings with council, and we've had several meetings with staff, including technical advisors from the Conservation Authority and the County of Simcoe. Some key themes and values are emerging that are going to inform the preparation of the official plan. We hear a lot about walkability, social inclusivity, healthy lifestyles, sustainability, connectivity, and a higher quality of urban design. These are topics in themselves that are embedded in multiple of the discussion papers, and that's going to become a foundational part of the vision and principles for the official plan. This is not a wholly inclusive list. There will be things added to this and explanatory text, but nonetheless, these are some key values that we believe are important moving forward. Next slide. So to begin a brief conversation of what we've done in our options and recommendations report, I'm going to start with a brief discussion of something that I'm going to mention every time we meet, and then I'm going to go through the draft where we are today. Next slide. So in an official plan, we have lots of options. We're going to be making thousands of decisions about what we want to regulate and how we want to regulate it, and what is the level of control that the municipality, first of all, is allowed to exert, and secondly, wishes to exert. Sometimes that means telling yourself what to do. So every policy has to go through a sieve of understanding whether you want to be highly regulatory, whether you see yourselves as managing, change, or whether you see an opportunity to facilitate change and positive outcomes. Doesn't mean that every policy has to be the same. In fact, each policy may hit a little different level on this scale as we work through the plan. But nonetheless, that's what an official plan is supposed to do, and that's provide the framework through which council makes decisions about the future. Next slide. In terms of growth management, there's a number of topics that we have to deal with, and as many of you will know, we are not in this business alone in terms of managing growth for the town of Collingwood. Absolutely, the province is involved through the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Their work goes through the County of Simcoe, CIV, and as all of you I'm sure are aware, the recent version of the growth plan has extended the growth horizon to the year 2051. However, the county has not yet got to the work that will allocate growth, intensification targets, greenfield density targets on through their countywide municipal comprehensive review. That work is just in its infancy, and in fact, they've just awarded the bulk of that work to a consulting team. So we will not be able, in this iteration of the official plan, to prepare a plan that goes to 2051. Your current plan goes to 2031, and I think it's a reasonable approach to come somewhere in between 2031 and 2051. So we are going to be exploring an opportunity to extend the time horizon out to 2041 or 2046. The approach here is to conform with another piece of provincial policy, the provincial policy statement, also brand new, that gives municipalities the opportunity to plan for a 25-year horizon. On each of these slides, you will see a golden greenish check mark, and those are the options that so far we believe is where we're going to try and head with the official plan. So I'm going to focus on those options primarily, keeping in mind that there's always the option to keep the policy framework the same as it currently exists. And then again, there are options to be more regulatory or more facilitative as we move forward. The next topic is intensification. And in this case, I think a slightly different approach to how you deal with intensification is appropriate. Not that things have been going dramatically awry in Collingwood, but I would like to have an opportunity to look at a very clear focus of the intensification growth in identified centers and corridors within Collingwood. In my mind, the corridors are primarily today retail, commercial corridors. And I'm looking for opportunities to introduce higher intensity forms of residential development that would be compatible with not only adjacent communities, but also compatible within the identified corridor. Today you have one fundamental center, and that is your downtown. That has the added layer of the Heritage Conservation District, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little later on. In the centers and corridors, we'll be looking for clear direction in terms of what height and what intensity of development is appropriate in those corridors, keeping in mind that one of the fundamental elements of the growth plan is to establish an urban structure that will support enhanced investment in a transit system. And certainly a mixture of uses and higher intensity development are elements of a transit supportive structure. Next slide. Currently, you have quite a complicated commercial hierarchy, and I'm looking for opportunities that will recognize the importance of the downtown, because I think that approach has worked in Collingwood. But I also want to look at simplifying the hierarchy, broadening permissions in the commercial areas, including the introduction of residential, and talk about new development in the terms of compatible development, which would be specifically defined and articulated in the plan. In terms of the industrial areas and your business parks, again, the provincial government provides specific protection of those land uses for their intended use, and the avoidance of unsubstantiated conversions to other land uses. It's a very important principle that we need to ensure is included in the Town of Collingwood official plan to make sure that your inventory is appropriately protected. That does not mean that every parcel will be protected, but certainly that's the starting point for the discussion about conversion. There is also an opportunity to simplify the hierarchy of your employment areas based on their intended function and character. And this needs to be linked back to the economic development strategy to ensure that we have the right type of land in the right location to achieve your objectives. Next slide. And by the way, you'll see a lot of check marks because there's a lot of opportunity to explore some ideas. In terms of sustainable development, sustainability is a huge topic. So here, absolutely, we'll be talking about sustainable development in a number of lenses: economic sustainability, the sustainability of new buildings, and sustainability of the natural heritage system, which I'll get to shortly. The provincial planning framework does now recognize the need to respond to climate change. Notwithstanding, there's no explicit policy that allows you to compel development to be more sustainable. There are certainly frameworks that we can include in your official plan that talk about green building technology and enhanced sustainability. And we will be looking at opportunities to include that in your official plan. And we'll include ideas about how that might be implemented. What's important here is how do you measure success? And we'll be looking for opportunities to provide the town with an appropriate framework to not only incentivize green building technology, but to measure your success in achieving it over time. Next slide. Housing. Housing options is one of the most consistently talked about issues that I've heard in the town of Collingwood. And it's an unbelievably important element of this official plan, keeping in mind that I did a little bit of research on housing costs in Collingwood and was stunned to find out how expensive you are relative to other municipalities in southern Ontario. You have a very significant dependence on low intensity, single detached, and very expensive housing. So the goal here is to try and broaden the requirements for a range and mix of housing in your greenfield, your delineated greenfield areas. Certainly within existing neighborhoods, the additional dwelling unit policies and requirements of the provincial government will help. But we also need to make sure we're dealing with affordable housing, however that is defined. And here in Collingwood, we have affordable, attainable, accessible housing that is talked about interchangeably. And we need to put some definition around those phrases and to make sure that we're getting all of it. There is the social housing aspect of affordable housing, there's the market aspect, and then there's the opportunities to provide accessible housing under the AODA. So my objective here is to give the municipality all of the tools that are available to you to try and achieve your affordable housing target. First of all, you have to establish a target. Then you need a policy framework that will help you achieve it. The very last checkpoint on here is a brand new planning tool that's in the Planning Act that the province has put in, and it's the very first planning tool that compels the development industry to build affordable housing. In an official plan, what are we are required to give you empowering policy for you to be able to use that tool, which is, as the name implies, a zoning tool. What we don't know today are a couple of things. First of all, whether or not Collingwood will be permitted to use that tool. And secondly, if you are permitted, what are the mechanics of using the tool that the province still has not worked out? The tool exists, but we don't know whether you can use it, and we don't know the specifics of how it is to be implemented. So it's certainly something that's out there. It's certainly something that will assist the municipality in achieving affordable housing. We just need to ensure you can use it and wait for the direction from the provincial government. Next slide. Community design. We've heard a lot about upping the bar on urban design in Collingwood, and we expect that we will attempt to take the current framework, which is a relatively soft process relying on urban design guidelines that is a document outside of the statutory management of official plan policy, and including some of the language from the urban design manual in the official plan and give it the statutory strength of a policy. We're also hoping to make some recommendations on what elements of that urban design manual can be implemented through the zoning bylaw, another statutory planning tool. We're looking at the expansion of your architectural control process and providing some more detailed guidance in the urban design manual as to how that might work. And we're going to explore the opportunity to create an urban design review panel, which is something that many municipalities have implemented as a test of the quality of the design by a number of development architectural, landscape architectural peers that provide an overview commentary element to the approval process. Next slide. In Collingwood, the heritage character is a very important part of the community, particularly downtown and in the older neighborhoods that surround it. Those things need to be conserved. The province provides very specific wording in the provincial policy statement about conservation. And the Heritage Act also provides additional legislative opportunities for the municipality to manage new development, either including or incorporating a designated or listed heritage building, or with your downtown, the Heritage Conservation District that covers its entirety. The goal here will be to establish some guidelines as to how new development might be appropriately integrated into the heritage character. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to mimic historic built forms, but it certainly means that it has to be compatible and understand what makes Collingwood historically important. We've heard a lot of discussion about the downtown, and certainly there's development opportunity. The goal is the balance between what's important from a heritage perspective? And how can new development be appropriately integrated? So we'll be adding some conversation about heritage compatibility and new growth. And also there's the architectural control process that I talked about for other forms of development, as well as a design review panel that could be more informed about heritage conservation and how to work with new development in those important designated heritage areas. Next slide. The natural heritage system. This is a really important part of your plan as well, and it will be the first layer that we apply to your mapping, to your new mapping. We have been working with the conservation authorities in identifying the comprehensive natural heritage system within the town of Collingwood. That comprehensive natural heritage system will form the basis of the new designation for the natural heritage system. And then there'll be the application of what we call an overlay that will be anywhere from 90 to 120 meters from the natural heritage features themselves, and will trigger the requirement for detailed environmental studies to ensure that new development creates no adverse impact on the natural heritage system. Some of the complexities in a community like Collingwood is that we have to recognize existing lots of record and their ability to develop. And we also have to recognize that over time, there has been development approvals granted that need also to be recognized. And those will be recognized on the maps. We will be looking at opportunities to where there's an opportunity to change existing approvals, that the new natural heritage system become applicable. Next slide. We talked a little bit about the downtown and the heritage aspects already. There is planning policy that is quite restrictive today, and we'll be looking at that to make sure that other forms of compatible development may be appropriate. We don't know the outcome of that yet, but we'll be looking at trying to achieve an appropriate balance between permitting new intensified development and respecting the heritage character of the area. As I mentioned, we'll be looking at including some, as policy, some of the heritage elements from the Heritage Conservation District Plan and from the existing Urban Design Manual. We are going to be looking at opportunities for the downtown to enhance its role and to become a fully diversified community center that includes retail and service commercial uses, restaurants, residential development, and hopefully office development. The waterfront, the shipyards, they also have a plan in place that we'll be hoping to implement in the appropriate way through identification of key principles and then reference back to the plan. It's a lot of good work that's already been done. No need to redo the whole plan. So we'll be looking at implementing that plan. Next slide. Transportation. There are some existing transportation policies that may be appropriate for carrying forward. We do need to make sure that we are up to date with provincial policies and the growth plan. And that means we need to focus on a multimodal transportation system that includes a full opportunity for active transportation and complete streets. We know for sure that the municipality has implemented a great trails network, and that is a fundamental component of the active transportation system. As I mentioned before, it's really important from a provincial perspective that the urban structure that we promote is supportive of enhanced transit opportunity in the long term. We will be looking at your transportation master planning work and implementing the key objectives from those documents, but not repeating those documents. So we're looking for the right level of implementation for those good pieces of work as they evolve. Next slide. Municipal infrastructure, same thing. You have an existing policy framework. You have a master servicing plan that we'll be attempting to implement, but we aren't going to get into all of the details of the master servicing plan. We want to hit the right level of the balance between what's in the official plan and what remains in the master plan only. Certainly, we are looking at opportunities, and we'll be working with your engineering department to talk about some green infrastructure opportunities, including low impact development, which is a different approach to stormwater management. Next slide. So that's a lot of information to digest. It is in a document that we will be releasing to the public shortly and discussing partly with them on November 30th and December 1st. We'll be looking forward to having a conversation with all of you councillors as we proceed from the options and directions report into the drafting of the first draft of the official plan. So once we get through that part, and that will include the public consultation events next week and an additional online survey, we'll then begin phase 5, which is the preparation of the first draft of the official plan. And I thank you very much for listening to me this evening. Happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Ron, for that presentation. And I know Council, we all had an opportunity to meet with Ron last week. Are there any follow-up questions, Council, today based on the presentation you just saw? Certainly lots of food for thought, and
sure.
Looking at all those discussion papers, there's an incredible amount of public input. We have a very engaged public, and so I'll be very interested to see how the sessions go next week, and look forward to chatting with you again. But this is a great outline, lots of thought-provoking stuff, and we look forward to looking at how we can make all these good things happen.
Great.
Good. Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you.
All right, Council, that brings us to item 6, the consent agenda. And it is moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration by Council, be received. There are 5 items. 6.1, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit 2019-2020 Annual Community Report. 6.2, Tim Fryer, next steps in relation to the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. 6.3, Baker Tilly re-audit of December 31, 2019 financial statements. 6.4, NVCA media release, proposed changes to Conservation Authorities Act. And 6.5, Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management re-request for free parking in downtown during the holiday season. I understand we have a motion prepared for that. And before I call the vote, I will open forward just if anyone has a comment without pulling an item, just a comment about any specific item on the consent agenda. Councillor Madigan.
Just a friendly reminder, Mr. Mayor, that 6.5 I will be stepping out of.
Okay. I've got that down. Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Is there any other items people wish to speak to before I call the vote? Before I call the vote, I just would like to, on 6.1, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. This, as the Deputy Mayor has noted, has been a very unusual year over the last 8 months, and the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit and Dr. Gardner and his team have played a huge role in protecting our community. And so I want to thank them for all their hard work and acknowledge that this has certainly been a year like no other so far. So with that being said, I'll call the vote to receive the items then. All in favor? That is carried. We were all green there. And council items to be pulled. I've got Deputy Mayor and then Councillor McLeod. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
6.5, please.
All right, thank you. And Councillor McLeod?
6.4.
Okay. Are there any other items, Council? Seeing no others, I will go first to 6.5 with the Deputy Mayor. So Councillor Madigan, you may want to recuse yourself.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I would simply like to table the prepared motion on behalf of the BIA, and I would look for a seconder.
Okay, I see
So-
Councillor Berman.
Okay. So
Do you want me to read in, or do you want to just speak to it and then I'll read it in? Why don't you do that? Go ahead.
I'll just briefly read it in, or sorry, not read it in, just speak to it.
Okay.
There has been a tradition in the past of supporting the holiday season with complimentary parking in the downtown. However, at our last special meeting of the BIA, the board discussed being a little bit more proactive in terms of keeping vehicles moving, particularly as it relates to Hurontario Street. And we know that the back 3 parking lots are available. And so the intent here is to simply keep people moving off of Hurontario, but make available free parking 2 weeks prior, 1 week after December the 25th, for those to use when shopping and dining and doing business within the core.
Okay, thank you. And I'll read it in then. It's moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved, the council herein support the request from the BIA Board of Management to permit free parking in the downtown during the holiday season from approximately 2 weeks prior to Christmas and 1 week following. Councillor, any questions or comments before I call the vote on this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Sarah, maybe you can let Councillor Madigan know that we're finished with that item. And I will pass it over to Councillor McLeod, 6.4.
Thanks. I pulled this item from the consent agenda in order to ask council to provide some direction. And I believe I will require waiving of notice. I have a motion prepared. You've all seen it. I'll tell you why I'm asking for waiving notice before I look for a seconder. The province has inserted into its COVID recovery budget bill, unveiled November the 5th, a section pertaining to conservation authorities. It's called Schedule 6. It does a lot of things, and it went unremarked upon for a little while because it was tucked into the budget bill during a pandemic. It has 44 schedules, the budget bill, which is named 229. And in Friday, it was subject to time allocation at Queen's Park. So that ends second reading and sends it to the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs. And so there's a deadline for comment, not only from the public, but also from municipalities, of December the 2nd. So I'm aware that normally anything connected with the MVCA would be discussed at Development and Operations or council with a notice of motion. However, the invocation of closure on Friday means that DNO and a subsequent council meeting will come after the comment period has closed. And I feel like we need to have our say or choose not to have our say. So that's why I'm asking for waiving of notice. It's time sensitive.
Thank you very much for that. I'll look for a seconder. We have Councillor Jeffrey, and my understanding is we do not have comments or questions on a motion to waive notice. I'll look to the clerk. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, Your Worship, to all members of council, and my apologies to Councillor McLeod because she did ask. She did follow the procedural bylaw. She provided notice actually last week that she would be pulling this item. So notice of motion waiving is not required at this point.
Okay. All right then. Thank you for that clarification, Sarah. So
that was easier.
Then I will look for a seconder for your notice. So we got Councillor Madigan this time. I'm going to read it in. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while. It's a fairly long one, but here goes. So whereas the province has introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Schedule 6, Conservation Authorities Act, and whereas the legislation introduces a number of changes and new sections that could remove and or significantly hinder the Conservation Authority's role in regulating development, permit, appeal process, and engaging in review and appeal of planning applications. And whereas we rely on the watershed expertise provided by local conservation authorities to protect residents, property, and local natural resources on a watershed basis by regulating development and engaging in reviews of applications submitted under the Planning Act. And whereas the changes allow the minister to make decisions without Conservation Authority watershed data and expertise. And whereas the legislation suggests that the minister will have the ability to establish standards and requirements for non-mandatory programs which are negotiated between the conservation authorities and municipalities to meet local watershed needs. And whereas the municipalities believe that the appointment of municipal representatives on the conservation authority boards should be a municipal decision, and the chair and vice chair of the conservation authority board should be duly elected. And whereas the changes to the duty of members contradicts the fiduciary duty of a Conservation Authority Board member to represent the best interests of the Conservation Authority and its responsibility to the watershed. And whereas conservation authorities have already been working with the province, development sector, and municipalities to streamline and speed up permitting and planning approvals through Conservation Ontario's Client Service and Streamlining Initiative. And whereas changes to the legislation will create more red tape and costs for the conservation authorities and their municipal partners and potentially result in delays in the development approval process. And whereas the municipalities value and rely on the natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdictions for the health and well-being of residents, municipalities value the conservation authorities' work to prevent and manage the impacts of flooding and other natural hazards. And municipalities value the Conservation Authority's work to ensure safe drinking water. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Town of Collingwood respectfully requests the Province of Ontario repeal Schedule 6 of the Budget Measures Act, Bill 229, and further that the province continue to work with conservation authorities to find workable solutions to reduce red tape and create conditions for growth. And further that the province respect the current Conservation Authority and municipality relationship, and that the province embrace their long-standing partnership with the conservation authorities and provide them with the tools and financial resources they need to effectively implement their watershed management role. And with that, Councillor MacLeod, would you want to speak now or go at the end?
I'll speak now.
Okay.
I believe there's one more piece that I think we need to add. I'll look to the clerk for some advice on this because I'm looking for a letter to be sent with this motion to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, the Standing Committee of Finance and Economic Affairs. Does that need to be included in the motion?
Sarah?
Through your worship to Councillor MacLeod, we send it as a resolution letter.
Okay.
So that doesn't need to be added.
Okay. So you don't need Julia Douglas's address. Okay. I apologize for the length of that motion. It's not the longest one. I think the judicial inquiry one was a bit longer, but that was pretty darn long. It is the same motion that is being heard in several municipalities across the province this week. Written with the help of Conservation Ontario, which is the governing or the umbrella organization for the 36 conservation authorities across Ontario. And one of the reasons that it is that long is because it is seen as an existential threat to conservation authorities, Schedule 6. And we feel as though it ought to be debated on its merits outside of a budget bill. That motion has already passed in some form or another in several municipalities in Halton Region, as well as in Essa Township and in Blue Mountains. Clearview Township is going to be hearing about it tonight, debating the same motion with a few changes. Mono Township is also going to debate a similar motion this week. Those are just the ones that I know of from the conversations that I've been having this week. So as I said, the contents of Schedule 6 amount to a fundamental alteration of the responsibilities of conservation authorities, and I'm not going to go into all 13 of them. because nobody wants to hear a councillor say, I just want to make these 13 points. I will say, however, that such wide-ranging changes to an entity that we here in Collingwood fund to the tune of about $270,000 a year, in which the province funds to the tune of about $88,000 a year, should get some input from us. But these changes are hiding in a budget bill that is, because of the pandemic, being expedited through the legislature. So far, the Ontario nonprofit group, Ontario Nature, says it has had about 14,900 people send emails to their MPPs requesting that Schedule 6 be repealed entirely or debated as its own bill. MPP Jim Wilson has also forwarded a number of emails to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And of course, you saw CAO Skinner's provided each of us back in January that primer on the work done and the value provided by conservation authorities. And of course, the information that she provided today. So I'm not particularly interested in debating the merits of the bill, although I do think it needs changes. But the problem that I'm having is that we need to say something about this bill. Should it come in a budget bill, or should it be debated? And so I'm asking we pass this motion tonight because it requests that the schedule be repealed during the province's budget talks. And we should let the province know that they shouldn't be sneaking stuff into budget bills. And if it wants to go ahead and change conservation authorities, that it should do it openly and in public with consultation. So that's why I'm requesting support for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty, and then I know that CAO has sent out some information and she will like to speak to that as well. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I think the wording of the motion should have been exactly what Councillor McLeod just said, poignant and to the facts. What I would like to add here is an opportunity for our CAO to submit comment on behalf of the municipality, not just strictly the request for the repeal, if she thought it was appropriate, because I thought the points she made in what she sent to us today were very valid and should be pointed out, other than just the hardcore conservation authority approach here. And I think it brings very much, the CAO's comments brought very much to the forefront the need of municipal autonomy and those who are paying the bill, and the need to have time. So I would just like to, I don't think it's a major thing, but I think I'd like comments to come from the town of Collingwood as well. If there's a seconder.
Thank you. With that, I will look to CAO Skinner then, and maybe some input from the clerk as well to find out if that requires an amendment or if that can be done as a matter of course. But first, I'll let CAO Skinner speak to our comments.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, through you to Councillor Jeffrey and to the rest of council. Should council wish it, I'd be very pleased to submit some more detailed comments on behalf of staff to the province on this item. And do you want me to note my overall high-level comments right now, or a little bit later? Just didn't want to usurp your process.
I think it would make sense to go over them now so that we can get some direction on how best to incorporate those with the motion. And I do know that Councillor Doherty is, and I've got her on my list, so I think it would make sense to go now, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am the former CAO of a conservation authority, and I made these comments with the knowledge of the inner workings of a conservation authority. However, I made all of them with the municipal hat on and with an understanding and a focus on the municipality's interests. Overall, I support the motion. I don't believe the changes that are proposed have been shown to be good for municipalities. And at a minimum, I would like for the province to allow more time for municipal input. There has been input, and some people would say, potentially sufficient municipal input. There were a number of meetings in the fall. However, the meetings were not on this specific proposal. They were generally what people might like to see done, and not on these rather large changes. Councillor McLeod and the motion itself note a couple of the changes, but the ones that really strike me are the duty of members to act on behalf of the municipality, And the overall intention of conservation authorities is that there's a value in a shared approach to managing and monitoring water that precipitates into one bowl or watershed. You really can't work on the hydraulics of a river when that river is just passing through Collingwood or just passing through Clearview. You need to look at the whole thing. And we can't really do that on our own. And in this era of increasing development and climate change with the potential for more flooding and droughts, it's really going to weaken our ability to address these types of issues if we don't have a board that's truly looking at the full watershed. And of course, everybody sitting on that board are appointed by their municipality, and they do always have their municipality's interests available to them. But this is about how we work together in the new era. And the new era, I believe, is more about collaboration and understanding the broader perspectives. It talks about non-core work being subject to a specific MOU with each municipality. And what that means is that we would have a lower levy overall, less than the 270,000 that covers everything today. But then we would have one or more MOUs for all the other things, the kids program, supporting tree planting, base costs, environmental education, water quality monitoring, water quality initiatives. And you can imagine how complex that decision-making will become at the board of directors, the Conservation Authority Board of Directors, when this decision applies to Clearview and Wasaga and Agila, Toronto, and that one applies to Collingwood. There's some planning considerations whereby conservation authorities are no longer being considered public bodies that could have their own opinions at LPAT. And also it does appear that conservation authorities would be removed from the one window for development applications process, at least in my initial read of the material. And it removes a number of abilities, including stop work orders, which means that if someone who perhaps just doesn't know that they shouldn't be removing a wetland without a review and a permit starts to remove one, there would be no way to ask them to stop that or to get that stopped quickly. Overall, this wouldn't affect the idea that we can use the Conservation Authority as a shared, independent, nonprofit environmental advisor to our municipal council for natural heritage decisions. However, those same resources that are knowledgeable in this support other Conservation Authority programs about, fish and forest and plant experts. So it would make our costs, or actually it will be the developers' costs who pay for that service through their application fees, more expensive if it's not offset by using those folks across multiple municipalities and multiple programs. And finally, it does assume in this legislation that there's someone in the provincial government who can assess the flooding risk in Collingwood better than the CA who is here and override their decisions to allow developments where the Conservation Authority has recommended and regulated that they not go. So I'll close with the fact that CAs can be very confusing. Fundamentally, they regulate the protection of people and property from flooding and erosion and carry out the science to do that, how much flow is coming from Clearview to Collingwood as an example. And as a secondary skill, they look at other things like monitoring and advising municipalities and others about green spaces. However, that green work and the other programs are advisory and advocacy and not regulatory. Also, while there are many developers and others with legitimate concerns about conservation authorities, it may be the fees, it may be how long it takes to get an answer, it may be whether they feel that answer is fair and transparent. However, I think that these are items that need to be worked on in that specific area of concern, and not necessarily by weakening a water-related authority for whom, if conservation authorities don't do that work, we may end up being accountable for it at the municipal level. And I don't see that it is in the best interests of Collingwood to make Collingwood as a local municipality accountable for these issues, or otherwise to make counties accountable for these issues when the counties and the watersheds don't have the same boundaries. So I hope that's a brief enough overview for council on some of the issues in this section 6 of Bill 229. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm going to look to the clerk. Sarah, we've heard that Councillor Jeffrey would like to include those comments. I know in the body of the motion it talks about the province continuing to respect the Conservation Authority municipal relationships, but I don't know if that slides in under that, or if we should be, if this is an amendment to the motion or a friendly amendment to add this additional feedback.
Certainly, Your Worship. I would propose that Sonia and I work together in drafting it. Obviously, she has some expertise and already put some thought to paper. And in the letter that we send, we can add some of the points that she has articulated to ensure that the province and those that we send this to have a full understanding of the background to this motion.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Jeffrey, does that address your concerns?
Yes and no. I think that Councillor MacLeod referred to the fact that anybody could make comments on this. And I don't particularly feel the need to piggyback per se on what the CAs are doing through that motion. But I also want us not to miss the opportunity to have the CAO send her very excellent points to them so that it's heard. Whether we put both those letters in the same envelope, I don't think that matters, but I really think that it should be our municipal position, aside from us supporting a CA motion. But it's our motion, but I'm not sure I want them melded together. But maybe I'm just being too vigilant.
I think if you want it to go by way of separate correspondence, I think maybe you should. You're looking at bringing a separate motion, I think, or I'll look to Sarah. I mean, can we ask that the comments be sent as part of the initial CA motion in by separate correspondence, or would that require a separate motion?
Through Your Worship, I'm just reviewing the resolution itself. The resolution doesn't support Conservation Ontario's position. It's a resolution. The town of Collingwood respectfully requests the province to appeal. I agree that it was obviously put together through the conservation authorities, and there's nothing that would prohibit the CAO to send independent comments as well.
Okay.
So unless our CAO has something further she would like to add to that.
Sonia?
Thank you, through your worship. I am happy to provide the comments should council endorse that they agree with that direction. And I would, however, like to hear that formally, that through the vote, either with 1 or 2 votes, that council supported those. And therefore I could submit them, through the CAO on behalf of the town.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I'll look to you, Councillor Jeffrey. It seems to me there's an opportunity maybe to move an amendment to the motion that's on the floor, just to ask that the CAO's comments be endorsed by council and sent, as well as the Conservation Authority, as well as the motion moved by Councillor MacLeod on behalf of the town.
And I think, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I think it could be as easy as in further that that Council of the Town of Collingwood approves the CAO's comments as presented, and that they be forwarded in conjunction with the feedback on Bill 229.
Okay, well, if it's complimentary, and I think it is, given how we've cast this motion, then I'm going to look to Councillor MacLeod and the seconder, if they're comfortable with that as a friendly amendment. I'm getting a yes and a yes. Okay. Thank you. So then we have that amendment, and then I will go to Councillor Doherty for your comments.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I am very much in support of this motion and very much against the inclusion of Schedule 6 in Bill 229, the budget legislation. The manner in which this legislation was introduced is really shows a notable lack of transparency at a time when the importance of the natural environment has never been more strongly demonstrated. The town of Collingwood places a very high and dearly won value on transparency and should call on the province to do the same by first adhering to its own overriding planning policy documents, which in many cases fly in the face of elements of Schedule 6. And secondly, to present significant legislation like this with maximum transparency and maximum opportunity for public engagement. I'd also like to add that in this town, our particular conservation authority has played a very important role over the years in that we are on lowland, in that we are home to many watercourses and wetlands, including the Silver Creek wetland, which is one of the few remaining provincially significant wetlands. Some of our watercourses, as our residents know, have been and are subject to to flooding. And our western commercial node and our newer western residential developments would not have happened without the collaboration of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in the channelization of the Black Ash Creek, which was a huge project and from a conservation standpoint, quite a breakthrough project at the time that it was initiated. Our residents have also told us through the community-based strategic plan that they treasure our natural spaces and they place very high value on the environment. So we, I believe, owe it to them to support any effort to ensure that our protected spaces are preserved and shielded from bulldozing by ministerial order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. So we have on the floor the amended motion, and it is moved by Councillor MacLeod and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Are there any other questions or comments before I call the vote, Council? No, it certainly is a very important issue for our community. We're the convergence of 4 separate watersheds as they come down to Georgian Bay, and this is an important part of our community. So, Councillor Doherty.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I forgot to add that in addition to sending this motion and correspondence to Queen's Park, we should really send it to AMO as well.
Okay, and I think I'm seeing a nod from the clerk and from the mover, so I think we can add that to our distribution list. And so, with that being said, I will call the vote on the motion then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. For a spontaneous motion, Councillor MacLeod, you certainly got us going. All right, and that brings us now to reports and minutes from other committees. There are 2 items on there, and let me find my place. It is moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that the minutes of the following boards be hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. And item 7.1 is special Collingwood Public Library Board minutes of November 12th, 2020, and 7.2 is special Police Services Board minutes of October 20, 2020. Are there any comments or questions, Council, before I call the vote? Go ahead, Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our CAO, with regard to the special meeting of the Police Services Board, I noted in there, and I've seen through our social media, there's a call out for public input on the priorities moving forward. I hope we'll be able to hear or see packaged in the minutes what some of that feedback is from our community. I think hopefully you're getting a good response, and I think it'll be really interesting to hear what our residents have to say about it. Thank you.
I know it's an ongoing process. Councillor Jeffrey, do you have anything to say as chair to that?
Through you, Mayor Saunderson. No, I think it'll be an important process for the board to hear that information and obviously to share what we're hearing. And I know anything we've heard from previous years has been very, very positive. So we're looking forward to engaging them in the process. Thank you.
Yes, and there are some changes afoot with our Police Services Board as well, with potential amalgamation. And Sonia, I don't know if you have something to add to
that. Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to comment through you to Councillor Comey to say that I was really pleased to see this public consultation happening, and the Police Services Board to react relatively quickly to put some draft priorities out for public consultation, because I think it is one of the most important things that the Police Services Board does. A lot of people, when they see the OPP patch on someone's sleeve, don't realize that it is our local taxes and a local contract through which that we contract the OPP to provide our local policing. And the Police Services Board, in selecting these priorities, will have a big influence on our community. So the summary of that public input will be very important, and Councillor Jeffrey will lead us through as chair of that board and setting those priorities in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council. Any other comments or questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us now to the Standing Committee Report, item 8.1. And that is moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Hamlin. Be it resolved that Council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee Report from its meeting held November 9, 2020, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. First is CAO 2020-10 5-year Economic Development Action Plan, and the recommendation is that, subject to budget approval, the Economic Development Action Plan and page overview be approved as a foundation for the town's economic development goals, that the Tourist Strategy and Action Plan and the Tourism and Lifestyle Implementation Priorities be approved as foundation of the town's tourism management efforts, and the Council acknowledge with much appreciation the significant work of the volunteers of the task force. Item 2 is P 2020-25 short-term accommodation, and the recommendation is that the report be referred back to staff. Item 3 is PW 2020-20 transit services update, and the recommendation is that Council approve the extension of conventional transit services to Landmark Bus for a 12-month period. The Council approved the extension of accessible transit services to the Canadian Red Cross for a 3-month period. The Council directs staff to proceed through the appropriate procurement process for the delivery of all accessible transit service through July 31, 2020, and that staff approach Ace Cabs to negotiate interim continuation of accessible on-demand service. And the final report is PW 2020-21, assumption of the Mountain Croft subdivision phases 1, 2, and 3. And the recommendation is that Council approve the assumption of all municipal works within phases 1, 2, and 3 of the Mountain Croft subdivision, and pass a bylaw to assume the roads within phases 1, 2, and 3 of the Mountain Croft subdivision. All of those items were passed unanimously at the Development Committee level. Are there any of those items that somebody wants to pull to change the direction or recommendation before I call the vote? Go ahead, CAO Skinner.
Thank you very much. I just think there's a small typo I wanted to note in the PW 2020-20 transit services. Yes. I could check with the clerk, but it is to set up accessible transit until July 31st, 2022. Is that correct, Director Slama?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you for that correction. It did say 2020 there, but as I read it, it didn't make a lot of sense. So thank you for that. All right, so seeing that no items are needed to be pulled for a change of direction, I will call the vote and then I will allow people to comment on any particular item. So first on the vote to receive and approve, all in favor? It's carried unanimously. Is there any items that people would like to pull? Seeing none, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Martin and his team and all staff involved in the Economic Development Action Plan and the tourism strategy. Those were very big projects and very critical projects that will, I think, arm us well as we proceed through the next 5 years. And I'd also like to thank each of the Economic Development Task Force members for their commitment of time and expertise and energy in this intensive process. And it's very much appreciated, and it will be, I think the results will be very impactful for our community. So thank you to each and every one of them. And that brings us then to bylaws. And bylaw 8.2.1 is the assumption of the Mountain Croft subdivision, phases 1, 2, and 3. And it is moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Hamlin. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-76, being a bylaw to assume the roads within phases 1, 2, and 3 of the Mountain Croft subdivision, be enacted and passed this 23rd day of November 2020. And are there any questions or comments before I call the vote, Council? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So this brings us under item 9.1, staff reports. And the first item is moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. It is be it resolved that staff report HR 2020-3 be received, and that bylaw number 2020-77 being a bylaw to a renewed collective agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood and International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local number 636, for the period of April 1, 2020 to March 31st of 2024, be enacted and passed this 23rd day of November 2020. And I see we have Manager McQuaig here. So Melissa, go ahead, please.
Good evening, Councillor. Thank you, Your Worship. So what's being presented tonight is the bylaw to approve the renewed collective agreement between IBEW, which represents 7 employees in the environmental services position in the wastewater unit. So the agreement is for a 4-year period from April 1st of 2020 to March 31st of 2024. And the priority for this group was a recognition of the complex nature of their operations compared to others within the department. The group's focus was reflected in their withdrawal of benefits and premium related proposals in favor of wage increases. And upon review of their requests, the skills, tasks, and industry standards, we felt that the level of treatment process complexity and working hazards should be reflected in their overall compensation. So the agreement has been structured that way. And in order to support a higher than typical initial wage increase, a balance over the term of the settlement was achieved through deferring benefit and premium increases and the acceptance of a new operator classification structure that sets the wages and number of operators required in each classification for new hires. That new classification system will actually provide us with some modest savings over the term of the agreement. The agreement provides for a general wage increase of 2.58% retroactive to April 1st of 20, and cost of living adjustments for each of the subsequent 3 years based on the Canadian Consumer Price Index with a minimum of 1.5% to a maximum of 1.8. And while the first year increase is above our typical compensation increases, with the fixed range of increases in the subsequent years, the average total compensation increase is between 1.82 and 2.04% annually, and those impacts will be included in the respective operating budgets. Director Slama is also here if there are any questions from an operational perspective.
Thank you, Melissa. Councillor, are there any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Melissa, for that. To your team for the bargaining on that. And I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. So the next item then is item 9.2, which is the adjusted funding requirement for Fisher Fields. And it is moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Hamlin. Be it resolved that council receives staff report PRC 2020-12 and that council approve a new budget envelope for the project in the amount of $1.242 million, inclusive of all costs, and a 5% contingency amount, and based on funds being withdrawn from the development charge reserve, non-DC reserve, and provided by the Collingwood United Soccer Club. And I see we have Director Culver here. Dean, go ahead, please.
My pleasure, Mayor Saunderson. Thank you. So I thought the report sort of picked up from the last time that we've been in contact with council around the Fisher Field. So I thought I'd do a quick recap of the history of this project, which I actually had to dig into my files to remind myself that it started back in the beginning of 2019 with budget approval for this project. From that approval, we went to public consultation, and that public consultation led to concerns about the capacity of the facility to serve the users there. That coincided with an opportunity for some provincial federal funding that we pursued unsuccessfully. But in building that design, we now have a phase 2 part of the project that could be implemented at a future time with other grant funding if it became available. But following that unsuccessful attempt, we proceeded to finalize the tender documents and we sent the opportunity out to the open market. The result was 18 bids, providing a range of pricing from $1.058 million to $2.68 million. So this report requests approval of the DC fund allocation to complete the project based on the low bid, which was compliant. We understand that this is an adjustment from the original scope, which talked about a $920,000 amount, or 910, I think. And I understand too that this methodology that specifically Parks, Recreation and Culture has pursued in the development of capital projects has created some confusion. So we're working to resolve that in future discussions with council. So for example, you'll see some funding requested in the budget for next year where it's design only. We are not asking for the capital envelope because we recognize that this creates a confusion when it comes to the establishment of the capital envelope. For example, when this project came forward, we identified the $910,000 based on a development charge study that was done 5 years prior, and without any architectural public engagement, engineering design work, or anything else to sort of inform the cost. It was a simple scope number, and us coming forward and seeking the request of that budget envelope probably caused some confusion. So we're here now after having done all of the work, 2 years of work, looking for approval of the low bid effectively through the approval of the funding envelope. I'll note that the DC funds are available. We have them in reserve. It doesn't just defer or displace any other project going forward. And that, let me just see here my notes. So another note is a reminder of what started this conversation 2 years ago was that somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 players a season use the Fisher Field facility, representing a wide range of ages. They take advantage of the facilities for a number of things. The PRC master plan identified Fisher Field as, I think it was either 1 or 2 in terms of most used fields locally or parkland locally. And right now we're working on ways to continue to try and maximize the opportunity of Fisher Field. The generous donation of a forest park out there actually sparks interest in developing trail works that we've been contemplating for years in order to create more value out of the field. So we know that these washroom facilities will continue to grow in value once established. So I'm happy to take any questions regarding this. file.
Thanks, Dean. Council, any questions, comments? Councillor Jeffrey? Councillor McLeod?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Dean answered my one big question was this going to have an impact through the reserves on the other projects that we wanted to be going? Because my recollection of our public engagement was the waterfront master plan was the #1 desire among the people of Collingwood. So then my mind went to the bigger picture of budgeting. We're in very different times now with COVID, unfortunately, following 2 years of a lot of work on this. So the discussion that I didn't see happen here was about the operating costs and how that's going to impact our budget in terms of having another building and something else to facilitate within the budget and what that impact will be. So I reading the report, I don't think it's desirable to go another year with porta potties and those kinds of things. But the finance doesn't sound like it necessitates us to do something like that. But I think the operations part is really key, because I think we did go through some other processes to put facilities in place and ended up over budget in some areas of 600, 800,000 to run them. So I would probably like to hear a few comments on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Director Colvin.
Through your worship. So the operating costs of this particular facility as it has ended up, I don't have that number at the top of my head. I could definitely come back to council with an estimate. I will say, though, that this is not the facility that we were contemplating when we were going after the federal and provincial funding, which did have a higher operational cost, given that it had a community space built in, a kitchen for teaching and things like that. This is effectively 4 washrooms, 2 dressing rooms, and a small referee room. So we can expect that, there will definitely be a cost for water use, but it's 4 washrooms. It's not a significant facility. Cleaning is, that's in the COVID time, that's something that's become more and more critical, and I'll totally admit to the fact that it's more and more expensive, and you'll see that represented in the budget as we go through those deliberations. But having said that, it's not a substantial space. And we always look to the user groups to assist with those things as much as possible to help keep the facilities in good shape. So we'll be doing the same in this regard. But again, if there is an estimate required, I can come back to council with that number.
Councillor Jeffrey, does that assist?
It does, but if I could just comment additionally then. So would the director see a benefit to sending it to the budget process at all, or is there some urgency to get going? Have we run it through our greening process lens? And, people got really fussed about the cost of the transit and the washrooms downtown at 580,000. I can't imagine, because I think I had it in my head that the 900 or whatever, our original amount represented a modular build of 2 parts. So 1.2 million, is that broken down between 2 parts, or is that 4 washrooms, a referee room, and a change room, or whatever that is? Because it's a lot of money.
Thank you. Through your worship. So no, the 920 didn't have any, or 910, I should say, didn't have a modular approach. When we made the application to the federal provincial fund, it was for roughly $2 million or $2.2 million, based on our understanding of what that larger building envelope might cost. So no, the number that was in the development chart study effectively addressed washrooms. And we did do a public consultation process where ideas like a place to gather, concessions, other things were all brought into the design framework, because it was effectively represented what people wanted. But obviously where we're at now is what we can afford. And with 18 bids on the plate from our RFP output, I can confidently say that we've achieved the lowest possible bid at this point. My concerns with turning this project away are manyfold. One is there's been a lot of staff time put into the development of an RFP, the evaluation process. We've paid for an architect to assist with that evaluation process. Turning us back potentially puts us where we're spending that money again in staff time and consultancy costs to help us figure out what the next steps are going to be. The urgency is that we have an award to make now, if council approves it. Going forward, I can't guarantee that tender document or that tender number stays whole, depending on how long budget processes take, which is why we came forward with the pre-budget approval now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, council? Councillor Hamlin and then Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment is simply that from my reading of the staff report, Fisher Field is one of the most used facilities in our community. I think, as Director Culver indicated, there's over 1,000 families who are there on a regular basis. And that this facility has long been identified as needed in our community, and I think it would be a shame if over the cost of cleaning a few washrooms that we didn't proceed with this at this time. So we have the funds there, and we've gone through the process. We've obviously got the best bid in the market with 18 having come in, and I'll be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say that I am in agreement with Councillor Jeffrey that this is a dose of money. Like we approved $910,000 and this is 1.2. That's 30% more than we had. I mean, if my math is right, that's 30% more than we approved. Like that's a lot of variance. And I understand we have the money in the bank, but I'm still annoyed that's what we came back with, even in such a competitive bidding process. And I'm curious through you, Mr. Mayor, to Executive Director Culver, is this because of COVID, do we think, or what's the reason behind it? And before you answer that, I am aware that when we approved the 910, that the vast majority, well, not vast, but the majority of that money was for the servicing of the site. The building itself is a relatively small proportion of that money. So that's kind of two questions. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, no. Director Culver, I think the first was to expense. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Your Worship. So this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier. Unfortunately, when we present a proposal to launch a project in the past, we leveraged on what was indicated in the development charge study. The development charge study is 910. We said, okay, so this is sort of our approval we're looking for. And in hindsight, that's an error. Because really what we should be saying is what is the amount of money we need of that 910 to advance the project and get the design and public consultation and consultants work and all the rest of that accomplished. And then once we have that and we have a good budget estimate in hand, come back to council and look for the approval of the budget envelope. Unfortunately, that's not the way we've done projects for the longer term, and we're fixing this going forward. As mentioned, we have a park project that will be presented through the 2021 budget, where all we're looking at is the design amount. There is an amount in a development charge study that talks about a larger mass, but we don't know what the public or this particular project is going to yield, whether it's in COVID times or based on 5 years of distance between when the study was done and current costings. So the answer to the first part of the question is, yeah, it's an expensive building, but with 18 bids, I really kind of feel very confident that we've and a lot of work done on the design. We shaved a lot of things down to ensure that we were getting as much utility out of the building and not, overspending on the building at all. Servicing does represent a large part of it because of the nature of that particular property, but it's taken holistically. I feel very comfortable with the number that we've ended up with after a lot of work and 18 bids. On the COVID influence, I think it's fair and safe to say that COVID has caused materials to go up. We've seen this in boardwalk projects. I know that Director Slama will talk about seeing those effects in some engineering projects. We definitely are seeing some influence there. When it came to the boardwalk, we actually took a pause on the boardwalk in order to see what would happen with boardwalk pricing, the material pricing, because we were concerned that 4 times higher. I was mentioning to somebody earlier that I went to the Home Depot on the weekend to buy a piece of plywood that normally costs $13 and had to pay over $40 for it. So I think that there is probably some influence there. But again, on a relative scale, when we talk about 18 bids and the top end of 2.6 all the way down to 1.058, I feel like we have, people who were trying to make sure that they were buffering for COVID and buffering for material expenses, and others who were saying, I'm going to take a chance on, shaving my expected costs down in order to achieve the best possible price in my bid. So I feel comfortable that we've kind of covered at least the best possible outcome at this time.
And as a follow-up, I'm sorry to thank you through you to Director Culver. Just one more question, if you could remind me, these 4 washrooms are 4-season washrooms, yes?
No, they're not. No, sorry, through you, Your Worship, they're not 4 seasons. They'd be for summer season. Again, in shaving things down and ensuring that we were getting most utility, we don't have an actual use for all seasons at this point. I would love to see us develop the park to a place where there is 4-season application. And if we were at that place, I'll be back asking for retrofits to heat them. But at this point, no, they're not 4 seasons. They're 3-season washrooms.
Thank you. I knew there had been a conversation about that at one point. Thank you.
I've got Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Director Culver and to the rest around the table. First, I just want to preface my comments by saying that in general, I'm supportive of this project. But I had posed the question to Director Culver offline, and Councillor McLeod, you just picked it up with regards to whether or not this was a 4-season opportunity or simply a green season opportunity. And I don't want to further delay this, but I'm wondering if there would be an opportunity to refer this to budget, and in between now and budget, if we had pricing come back to tell us what the green season, what a 4-season cost would be. The reason I ask is that I'm fully supportive of putting washrooms out there, but I'm also one that believes that what we see there today and the opportunities presented down the road are 2 different things. This is, in my opinion, a very underutilized park, has tremendous upswing. It's the park today, in my opinion, and this is gut. I don't have the raw data. This is gut, but I've had 2 kids grow up through the park, and that is, it's somewhat to a golf course. The premium times are Saturday and Sunday morning tee-off times, and the same as with soccer. It's 5 to 11 throughout the week at night, and then weekend play for all of the fields. But it's underutilized throughout midweek. It's underutilized, or it's not used, with the exception of persons walking dogs in the wintertime. And I think that there are tremendous opportunities for other activities at the park outside of what's currently being used, whether it be soccer, frisbee, the odd competition of some type of other sport. And I just think it would be a shame to go to the length of spending the kind of money that we're looking at for a green season development and not be able to capitalize on really maximizing sort of the yield management of the fields themselves. So if I use it from that context, almost from a hotelier perspective, in terms of trying to fill my occupancy through yield management, the best way to fill my fields through yield management may be to provide year-round washroom facilities. And I owe an apology because I maybe misunderstood that from day one of this project. I was thinking that, at a cost that we were looking at in today's dollars, in fairness to what Councillor Jeffrey brought up as it relates to the facilities that were built downtown, which are year-round washroom facilities. So I'm looking at something that's open year-round to the public at X number of dollars compared to something that's going out at Fisher Field that would only be a green season opportunity. And I just think we'd be really missing an opportunity unless there's something that a decision tonight would delay. I'd be in favor of actually moving this to the budget and allowing staff to come back with additional figures to my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I know there was some discussion earlier about the four-season facility versus green season. Director Culver, can you?
Yeah, so through your worship, I mean, back when we were applying for the federal provincial additional funding, we were shooting the moon, and we really were trying to advance uses. We were trying to predict what might occur. You know, we were talking about grooming Nordic trails. We were talking about lots and lots of other opportunities. And so, you know, at the top end of the spectrum, I completely understand where the Deputy Mayor is coming from. And I also completely understand the confusion because this project has changed shape a number of times along its path. Having said that, two things. One is taking it back to, you know, design. It comes with a cost because we'll be engaging both an architect and possibly electrical engineering to figure out, you know, what capacities are needed and install. And as well, it's time. Because again, we have 18 bids with a low bid sitting waiting for approval and for award. I can't guarantee, I have no idea, to be honest with you, if budget deliberations were to be prolonged, or I don't know how that works in terms of a delay, how long we would have to come up with a new plan, get it designed and approved and brought back to council for approval. So then we go back to our proponent and hope for, you know, appropriate pricing. We kind of got to this point, and I'm not suggesting that the notion is inappropriate or unwarranted, or, you know, because we had the same notion. We had the same notion when we were trying to shoot the moon and building the best facility. I will also say one other thing is that I do believe that this is not a difficult retrofit after the fact. If we are able to develop the uses for the winter season, going back out and, you know, with approval of council and developing a budget envelope and getting all the appropriate work done, we can come back to council and say, this could be phase 1A of this project. Council should also be aware that, you know, this field, this design, there are a number of costs, and I know Councillor McLeod kind of alluded to this, that, you know, the infrastructure costs or the servicing costs. Right now, as it stands, we were surprised by the cost of a septic field because the septic, we chose septic for the design, assuming that it was cheaper than tying into the town's wastewater system. But we're now actually in a place, because of the cost of the septic, but thinking after the award, we'll go back and say we need to evaluate whether or not it's actually a savings to tie directly into the town's wastewater system. This would be an ideal. Nobody wants to have a septic system. It's not the best solution, but it was the most cost-effective solution in terms of our design and engineering approach. But we'll be going back and taking a look at that, you know, again, with council's blessing of this project moving forward. So there are other opportunities for us to take a look at other potential uses and manifestations of the building going forward. I just, you know, again, staff's approach was, I was not build it and they will come when we didn't have the money from the province and the feds. The staff's approach was, let's build it for the services we know we need now, knowing that we can add the services later if they were warranted.
Any follow up, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So I do appreciate those comments, and I do appreciate the specific to the fact that, in your opinion, Director Culver, this is something that could be retrofitted potentially down the road, whether it be a year or 5 years, to accommodate expanded services. I'm coming from a lens, and I hope the others around the table just appreciate that you know, the arena that's at Central Park, the bubble isn't the issue. No one cares what the outside is made of. Well, some people do. It's the fact that we missed the opportunity inside. We had a blank canvas on the inside of that building, and there are fundamental flaws with that design, in my opinion, that can't be overcome. And I just want to be assured that, you know, 3 years from now, when the headline in the paper is that Fisher Field is being retrofitted at X number of dollars, the general public isn't seeing it sitting there going, you know, who is the, you know, clown deputy mayor that passed it at that time when he had an opportunity to pass something that would be for season today. So I do appreciate your comments. I appreciate your assurances, Director Culver, as it relates to the product that we're purchasing today. And with that said, I will continue to support what's presented tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and your point's very well taken. I mean, the more user groups we can accommodate out there, then the more we're stretching and finding efficiencies in our taxpayers' dollars. And the question, I guess, is how quickest and what's the best way to get us to that point. I have Councillor Comey and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments everybody shared today. I think one thing that I think is important to clarify to our public, and I appreciate the Deputy Mayor with the whole, you know, what the media say or whatever. So the first thing, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Culver, the source of the funding for this project, that the development charges, the fund, is it not set up specifically for growth-related projects such as this in our community? So if there's a headline that says this washroom is costing so much money, can we assure our residents that where this, could you speak a little bit to the rationale for where the funding comes from and why we have this type of fund for these types of projects?
James?
Yeah, so through your worship, I think the way I'll phrase my answer is yes, that's why the development charge is established. It's established to respond to the growth of a community. And as much as I think over time, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, I kind of wish that we could dig into the development charge fund to fund things like playground replacements or other matters that seem really, really urgent, trails that need to be renewed. The development charge fund, because of the rate of growth of the community, has grown faster than every other fund we have. So it would have been great to have those funds to be able to apply to maintenance and repair, but that's not what they're for. They're for growth. The Fisher Field facility was identified as something that was part of growth. And so we've moved forward on the basis that the community is at a point in its growth phase where it needs to have appropriate facilities for that soccer complex. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, it does. Please. So I think I can appreciate my colleagues' concern about their fiduciary responsibility, but what I'm hearing very clearly and what I saw as publicly noted was 18 bids that came in, 7 amendments that worked very hard to clarify the scope of work involved. And this is where our residents can get really frustrated with their council, because from early on, I think even potentially earlier than the staff report indicated, a previous council said that there was support for this project. And based on that assurance, a community group at the Soccer Association went out in the community and began collecting funds, a unique thing. So much so that, hey, if we want to get rid of these porta potties, everybody's going to have to chip in, but rest assured, because we received assurance from our town, this project's going to move forward. And subsequent to that, a lot of time went into it. And Director Culver pursued something that the Deputy Mayor is touching on. He worked really hard to put together a grant application to try to get us the best case scenario, which we all agree is brilliant, but it didn't happen. So instead, he has some drawings and plans that if the best case scenario should happen upon us again, that we can expand into 4 seasons. But in the meantime, dozens of residents came out and offered comment on the design. Grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads in the community have raised I think the staff report says to the tune of $60,000 to contribute to this. And I think the last thing our community wants is at the last minute, everybody to throw in a bunch of new ideas at staff. Well, what if we thought of this? Well, to be fair to Director Culver, he's been on this train for almost 2 years now with us. And I've spoken on it again and again, and our community has spoke on it. And staff has done everything we've asked of them. They've got 18 bids that come in, and this is the least expensive route we can go. So I think it's understandable to have a concern about our fiduciary responsibility, but he's found the lowest bid. And without question, our community has said that this is very much necessary, more now than ever in the midst of a pandemic, to have running water and somewhere to wash your hands after you use the restroom. So I fully support moving forward as is. Time is of the essence when it comes to bids and construction projects. And I guess that's all I really have to say on that. But I would please like, while I'm speaking, to ask the clerk for a recorded vote.
Thank you for those comments, and we certainly hope there's a soccer season next year. We need some bright lights on the horizon. Councillor Doherty, you are next.
Yes, thank you. I will admit that along with the deputy mayor, I was assuming that this was a 4-season use facility, and so I was surprised to hear tonight that it was only 3-season. You know, notwithstanding the fact that this particular facility or the whole field represents, you know, the first time that we might be able to offer our residents some winter activities like snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. You know, I agree that we need to move ahead with the proposal right now before we lose our quotation. But I'm wondering, could we not, within the 2021 budget deliberations, add the cost to upgrade the facility to create 4-season use while in these very early days, because I'm assuming that there won't be much work done on this facility before the budget is passed, and therefore the whole project could be undertaken seamlessly over the 2020 and 2021 budgets, if that makes any sense, and hopefully I'm not being too naive about that.
Director Culver?
So thank you, Your Worship. So what I think I would be comfortable committing to is exploring the possibility of adapting 3-season use as we go through the implementation, or sorry, 4-season use as we go through the implementation of this project with a successful bidder. I don't know, so I don't think it will necessarily hit the 2021 budget. But we will, as we go through the relationship of constructing the building, looking for, you know, savings and efficiencies and ways. And if somewhere along the way we can say, you know, it's possible to adapt some heaters to a number of the washrooms or one of the washrooms, I think I would commit to knowing that council has expressed a will to have that opportunity expedited. And then from there, if you're comfortable leaving with staff, we'll do the best we can to try and navigate towards a 4-season facility in the soonest possible time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor
Berman. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I think I had the same reaction the deputy mayor did when Dean's words for why it can't be referred for a week to the budget was that it's time, because I had a flashback to everything we've just gone through as well. I wish I'd had a crystal ball when I voted for the initial 900K because I struggled with that one too. But since we voted for that in 2019 And I'm not talking about a specific reserve fund, but we've had COVID, we've had damage more than once to Sunset Point. We've had JI costs that were higher than we anticipated. I don't think this thing's going to come in on budget because nothing ever does. I would rather do it once, do it right. I don't want to waste a lot of time speaking to it, but I'll be a firm no vote to this. I would support a motion to refer it to budget, but I'm not going to offer that.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Are there any other questions or comments, council? All right, we've had a request for a recorded vote, so I'll pass it over to Clerk Holmes.
Thank you, Your Worship. A recorded vote has been requested on the question. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your cards. Thank you. And all those opposed, please raise your card. One against. Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. And now that brings us to item 10. There are no notices of motion today. There are no bylaws today. Notices of motion, 12.1. Councillor Hamlin, you had a notice of motion. If you want to read it into the record. You're muted, Councillor Hamlin.
There we go. Thank you. That council delegate authority to the CAO to select a representative to participate on the Joint Physician Recruitment Committee in the absence of the appointed council representative, which, as you know, is me currently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll deal with that the first meeting in December. County report, we will defer that to the next meeting. Council business, hold or deferred business. 14.1.1 is the procedural bylaw changes. And it is moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-78 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held November 23, 2020. I think I'm reading the wrong one. I'll back that up. My apologies. It's moved by Councillor Hamlin, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-73 being a bylaw to amend provisions within procedural bylaw 2019-75 related to meeting times and timelines associated with the publishing of agendas be enacted and passed this 23rd day of November 2020. Any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Other business, we dealt with 14.2.1 previously. So 14.2.2 is the diversity and inclusion initiative letters to the federal and provincial governments. As you can see, the letters have been drafted and are with the agenda. There are two forms of them, one addressed to 3 recipients and others addressed simply to the Premier and the Prime Minister, and those are the ones we will be using. I want to thank Director Culver for his assistance in drafting those letters. And there is a motion, and it is that it's moved by Deputy Mayor Hall and seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved, the Council endorse the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative letters as provided. However, I would like to propose a friendly amendment based on my discussions with Director Culver. We would like to run those letters by our Diversity and Inclusion Committee for their feedback and input. And there is some suggestion that there might be other organizations that would be interested in supporting our letters to both levels of government. So I propose the following amendment, and it reads, and further, the council direct the letters also be circulated to other suitable agencies or organizations as deemed appropriate by staff for support and endorsement. So if the mover and seconder, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor McLeod, are comfortable with those amendments, or that amendment, thank you, then we'll put that on the table. Council, are there any questions or comments about the letters? Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just to ensure this isn't going to usurp our process with the FCM to pursue the federal government, or we're doing this in advance to bring their attention to it, or I just wanted to understand clearly.
This is a parallel process entirely, and so we will still be pursuing both FCM processes and AMO for the provincial government, but we thought it would, that we should lead the way, I guess, by writing our own letters and reaching out to other organizations with input from our Diversity and Inclusion Committee as well. But certainly, no, we're intending to pursue with FCM and AMO every opportunity to assist in pushing these forward.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry, Director Culver, I didn't mean to answer that question in your place. If there's anything you want to add to that, Dean, go ahead.
No, thank you, Your Worship. You answered it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Council? Yes, go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did want to add one thing through you to Councillor Jeffrey as well. I believe these letters were explicitly in the resolution that Council made originally. It was to work with AMO and FCM, and also to send letters of support asking that the federal government, for example, look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and hate provisions at their level. I think that both actions were specifically noted for staff to pursue, although I see the benefits of both.
Okay. All right. Certainly, it's all part of the process, and this is, I think, these items require pushes from every direction on other levels of government, and it's great to be getting feedback as well from our committee, our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. It's an exceptional group of representatives from our community, and so their input is greatly appreciated. So unless there's any other questions or comments, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So 14.2.3 then is the physician recruitment update. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended a meeting of our joint Municipal Physician Recruitment and Retention Committee on Thursday last week. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to bring Council up to date on the discussions as they're unfolding. So as you know, this committee includes not only Collingwood, but Clearview, Town of the Blue Mountains, Meaford, and Great Highlands. And I wanted to start by saying that I have learned that we are not the only cross-municipal committee doing such an effort. They're forming across the province to do what our health ministry is encouraging municipalities do, which is collaborate in the securing of physicians for their areas. And just for example, the area of South Algonquin, they have 6 townships they're working together. There's a committee in West Northumberland, which includes Cobourg, which is the home for the local hospital, Port Hope, with several townships. There's one for 4 municipalities in the county of Haliburton. And another one I've heard about is in South Dundas, which is near Kingston. So at our meeting last week, we had 2 regional advisors from Ontario Health Force who presented to the committee. The Ontario government website describes Ontario Health Force as, quote, part of Ontario Health, a 21st century government agency responsible for ensuring Ontarians receive high quality healthcare services where and when they need them. We were told that Ontario Health Force is the only group at Ontario Health addressing physician recruitment and retention. We had 2 presenters. One was a woman by the name of Michelle Lang, who's responsible for Collingwood and other communities in Simcoe. And it was her analysis and the process that I particularly wanted to bring to the attention of Council. She said that she's looked at new data that she pulled from the census subdivisions covered by our committee's area, and she applied what she called an updated lens to the data. It was her conclusion that our area needs conservatively 9 primary care physicians right now. meaning 9 family doctors. And she said this does not take into account the fact the population's increasing and that we need to do succession planning for those nearing retirement age. I asked her the question I've been asking every speaker who comes to our committee. How can Collingwood participate and benefit from this exercise when we're not entitled to any more family doctors under the province's guidelines? And she had a good answer. Collingwood should be categorized as what is called a high needs area for physicians. She said that we needed to formulate a business case and forward it to the right person at Ontario Health. She said she has knowledge of what is needed for such a business case, and she would help us. June Porter, who's the chair of our committee, who is, I should say, an RN, also has an MBA degree and has worked in this field her entire career, also offered to lend her expertise to the preparation of such a business plan for Collingwood. Michelle said that the current list of what's considered a high needs area, the one we're not on, has not been updated for a while, and she thought we had a very good chance of getting on this list. Such a business plan would require input from our town staff, especially, I was told, in terms of population growth and demographics. And also, typically, there's input from the local LIN, or if one is fortunate to have one, the Ontario Health team serving one's community. At the end of last week, we know that our Premier, our Minister of Health, and the Minister of Long-Term Care announced the South Georgian Bay Ontario Health Team is one of the 13 new Ontario Health teams in the province, which is, of course, taken over from LHIN's. And they're going to provide connected care, not just doctors, but the hospital, community care providers, and so on for our region. And new for our South Georgian Bay Health Team, I'll just add, is that it includes the town of the Blue Mountains, which is one of the first times I would say that healthcare has ventured into the west area outside of Simcoe County. We've had discussion at our committee that for every 500 new dwellings, we need at least one family physician. Given the average family physicians practice is now averaging 1,000 patients, and I think I mentioned this last time. This is in addition to covering the existing shortfall. And it's well known that regular family doctors improve patient outcomes. They reduce mortality and decrease hospitalizations. They help manage chronic conditions and the medications that are needed. And they know you and your family history, and if you need a specialist, they find the right fit. To conclude on this part, our future could include developing and submitting a business case to get Collingwood onto the high needs physician roster. I also wanted to let you know that Miss Michelle has been in touch with our local doctors and coming to her conclusion that Collingwood should be on the high needs list. As well, June Porter's had a number of discussions with Nora Holder, of course, as the president of our Collingwood Hospital, about our physician recruitment needs. She's also obtained information from Ms. Porter about the pamphlet she's preparing for our communities, and she's also had correspondence from Dr. Lisi to our committee on the geriatric care available in our community. I mention all this to point out that Collingwood, as the home of the regional hospital and the largest population in the area, can't help but being at the epicenter of healthcare in our area. I'm going to finish by sharing information about the mandate of the committee. It's the intention of the committee to make recommendations by April 15th, 2021, as to whether the services of the physician recruiter be retained to aid the committee. Our regional health advisor from Ontario Health Force, who I mentioned was at our last meeting, suggested this was an important component for the future of healthcare in our community. Such a professional would not only build relationships with the local doctors to gain a confidential understanding about retirement dates so a pipeline can be built, but would actively represent us in what who knew is an ever competitive world of family doctor recruitment across our province. I understand this is going to come forward further for discussion in our budget next month, but if anyone has any questions now, I'm of course happy to answer them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Council, any questions for Councillor Hamlin? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. That was an excellent report. Thank you very much. When you're meeting with your colleagues and there's discussion about the needs of South Georgian Bay, Collingwood specific, just for context, how realistic is it when we talk about sort of our needs as it relates to communities, say within Peel region, that are are growing by the size of our community on an annual basis? And it's interesting, like when you talk about 500 patients, 1,000 patients, and you hear stories about doctors, GPs that have got in excess of 2,000 patients, and it's staggering. And so how are we sort of tempering what we need as it relates to what the rest of the province in the larger urban centers require?
Councillor Hamlin.
Sorry, can't seem to work my mute button. No, that's a really good question. We heard from the professional recruiter physician recruiter who works for the Midland area in the hospital there at one of our first meetings that I attended. And he seems to think we have a distinct advantage in our area. He put it in the context of it used to be very important to provide money to family physicians to come to your area. And some, but we don't currently. And he seemed to be of the view that what is so important now to the young doctors is lifestyle and the community that they want to bring their family to and their spouse. And he particularly felt that our area was well suited to, be attractive to doctors. I think currently we have a pretty good system, as I understand it, of residents rotating in and out and of our community, but the consensus seems to be that to really put ourselves to the next level and be actively working with these new doctors, we'll need a professional helper. I understood from hearing the Midland physician recruiter that he can spend years working with a doctor before he manages to land them for his community. Others might just be a month. It's building relationships with the medical community to entice them here. I hope that helps.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, and through you to Councillor Hammond. I'm assuming that your staff support is through economic development for physician retention?
In terms of the business case that has to be prepared, the person from the ministry who spoke to us last week said it would likely be information from economic development, because we would be talking about future population growth and demographics and that kind of thing.
Through you, Mayor Saunderson. So that's great, because I would assume then we would need some connection through our own economic development department here. And I know I've only been working on my Jordan assignment for a week, but I have been really reading with interest their approach to medical tourism. They have no natural resources. And it looks like something that would be interesting to pursue through our economic development in maybe a bigger picture, but attracting, just as they provide education for athletes, then we end up bringing athletes to our area. But I think you're dead on the quality of life and living that we have here will attract them. But I'm really piqued by this medical tourism that they have going on in Jordan. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And it is interesting. I think our hospital is known for its orthopedics and does orthopedics for the central region. So not just our Simcoe-Muskoka region, but another larger region as well. Council, any other questions for Councillor Hamlin? Seeing none, thank you very much, Councillor Hamlin. And that brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. I'll get it straight this time. It's moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-78, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held November 23, 2020, be enacted and passed this 23rd day of November 2020. All in favor? That is carried, and now I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a productive evening. Enjoy what's left of it.
Thank you.